Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fuel Poverty Action's series of monthly learning sessions, Fuel for Thought, from fuel poverty to climate change. Fuel Poverty Action is a group of ordinary people fed up with being robbed by greedy energy companies through spiraling bills and rip-off repayment meters. And Fuel for Thought is our space to share research and lived experience, tackle lies, and clear up confusion on fuel poverty and climate change as we ask and answer questions with experts, activists, and campaigners. Today is a special session for us as we'll be discussing Energy for All, which is Fuel Poverty Action's main campaign, or a sort of flagship campaign, if you like. Energy for All is our plan to turn around the UK's crisis of fuel poverty, in which millions of us are forced to live in cold, damp, and sometimes uninhabitable homes. Energy for All is founded on a proven energy pricing system that's used by over half the world's population in countries and regions including China, Bangladesh, Japan, South Korea, and California. Energy for All, however, does go further than anything that's been done before. It will provide every household with the essential energy and upgrades they need for free, with money from the grotesque profits of fossil fuel companies and high tariffs for extravagant and wasteful energy use. And not only will Energy for All overturn the injustice of the poorest paying the most per unit of energy, and also stop us being cut off when we can't afford unaffordable energy prices, but it will also keep our hard-earned income out of the coffers of energy executives and their companies who are making a literal killing, trashing the environment while we freeze in cold, damp homes. Energy for All has widespread support, with a petition having already received over 662,000 signatures from the public. And adding on to that, we've got a manifesto for Energy for All, which is supported by over 150 companies, charities, and trade unions. Not just environmental campaigners, but there are small businesses too. So as far as Fuel Poverty Action has been able to reach, most people see that Energy for All makes sense. It's common sense. It's a plan for everyone to stay warm and keep the lights on, keep our money to care for ourselves and our loved ones, and safeguard the environment and the future of our children. Now it's time for me to pass on to our first speaker. Kay, thank you for being with us today. Kay is a single mother of two adult daughters and the spokesperson for Single Mother Self-Defense, active for several decades in the global women's strike. Kay is going to speak about how single mothers are affected by fuel poverty and why they were keen to sign the Manifesto for Energy for All.
Okay. All right, shall I go ahead, Amal?
Go ahead, yeah. Thank you, Kay.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for inviting us to come and speak. I was reminded we were at the launch of the manifesto, actually, which was in 2003, I believe, outside the House of Lords. So, you may have met us before, Anyway, I just wanted to say that Single Mother Self-Defense was formed in the 1990s to defend single mothers' entitlement to welfare benefits as financial recognition for the work of raising children and against welfare cuts. We're part of the global women's strike, as Amal says, which calls for a care income for all those who care for people and the planet. And we're also part of Support Not Separation, which is a coalition of organisations working to end the unwarranted and devastating separation of children from their mothers and other primary carers. We've picketed outside the Central Family Courts in London every month for coming up for 8 years, demanding that the courts are not secret, so that the press can come in and report on the kind of accusations that mothers are facing. And one of our key demands has always been take away our poverty and not our children. Some figures to give you: over 82,000 children are now in care, which is the highest number ever. And since 2013, there's been a 20% increase in newborn babies taken from mothers who have just given birth, on the basis of possible future emotional harm, even when no harm has actually been caused, and support and resources would have enabled the majority of those mothers and children to be together. Years of austerity, 80% of it targeting women, the cost of living crisis we're in now, welfare cuts, sanctions, the lowest paid jobs, job losses, escalating homelessness, and increasing destitution, especially for mothers who are seeking asylum, has resulted in half the children in single parent families living in poverty. 70% of single mothers already go hungry so children can eat, and that mums can save some money back to keep the home warm when the kids come back from school. 36% have no savings at all to draw on, and 13% use food banks, and 29% of households with dependent children are in fuel poverty. You may know a higher figure than that, but that's what I found just recently. We also are facing the universal benefit cap and the 2-child limit, which hits those with higher rents and bigger families especially. And also the bedroom tax, which I hadn't quite remembered how prevalent it is, but mothers in our groups are really facing the bedroom tax. If you have an empty bedroom, 25% reduction in your rent every week, which obviously hits the poorest families and the biggest families most. Children from the poorest areas are 10 times more likely to be in care. Families of colour, immigrant, young and disabled mothers are particularly targeted. And many of the organisations we work with, which includes the All African Women's Group, who I think have spoken to you before, the Disabled Mothers' Rights Campaign, the Women with Disabilities Group Invisible, Women Against Rape, and the English Collective of Prostitutes, have all seen huge increases in mothers coming to them in poverty. One of the things I wanted to say is there was a meeting of mothers at our centre today, and often, because of their hybrid meetings, you often see the mothers wrapped up in hats and coats and scarves in a daytime meeting, because they just have to switch the heating off and only put it on when the kids come home. And that means you get sick and ill very quickly yourself, and that can mean that you can't get into work. And when you're the only breadwinner in the household, you can get into a lot of trouble with that. It's hard to wash kids' clothes, as to keep the heating on, to put any kind of carpet down. The social services particularly notice when there's no carpets on the floor, and that's one of the things they accuse mothers of neglect with, that we are not putting, not keeping the children warm enough. They immediately go and check your fridge, see what's in the fruit bowl, to see if you are providing properly. Many mums are obviously struggling to get to the food banks, walking there and walking back with bags of shopping and small children with them. It's absolutely diabolical, as I'm sure many people know, and may know people in those circumstances. There's also been a big increase in destitution, where people really have nothing, and a lot of women who are asylum seekers, social services say, we'll keep your children here, but we're going to deport you. We'll support the deportation of you. So there's the All African Women's Group are really fighting those circumstances. And there's been a lot of more domestic violence, because women can't escape easily from situations, haven't got the money to go anywhere. And also there's a lot of mothers who are going back into sex work, or they're having to start sex work to earn a bit of money to pay the bills or to pay the rent. to pay for school trips, to even pay for school, school meals if you can't get free school meals due to the soaring cost of living. And 70% of sex workers are mothers. Mothers are increasingly being criminalized, as I said, and being labeled unfit. And our children are really at risk, as you've seen from those figures. And the separation really causes lifelong trauma. So we're glad to support the Fuel Poverty Action's manifesto, demanding universal free energy for all our basic needs. Free energy for all is essential for protecting single mother families so that we can turn up the heating, put the lighting on, put away the candles, cook a hot meal, run the fridge, wash the clothes, make sure the kids have a bath, keep warm ourselves and well, run a computer, charge a phone, have internet access, all those essential, and they are essential basic needs that our families have, so that we are safe and we can survive and we can thrive. And obviously, of course, I'm sure you've all said many times, it would also mean that working class people are valued by society, worthy of good health, of life and protection. And we wanted to also say that as with massive profits that are made by the energy companies, made by the poverty they inflict on us, the huge private child protection industry, which you may well have heard of, bankrupting a lot of local councils, does the same, making millions from local authorities, putting children into homes, private homes and foster caring. Energy companies could cap energy prices at source. The government could decide to give mothers money to end children's poverty. And that's what we're campaigning on, and we're glad to be with you all tonight, to find out what you'll be doing too. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Kay. Again, really appreciate you having you here this evening. Next, we're going to hear from Ruth London, one of Fuel Poverty Action's directors, who's going to be honing in on the principles that make Energy for All the most bold and common sense plan to turn the UK's energy pricing right side up. Okay, Ruth, thank you for being here.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I'm not on mute. Okay, so after having heard that, nobody can deny that the present energy pricing system has to go. First of all, it's killing people. Every year, many thousands of people actually die in cold homes in this very wealthy country. And of course, a lot who don't die do get ill, or just like Kay was describing, live in abject misery every winter. Sometimes pensioners not getting out of bed because that's the only place they can begin to keep warm. And a lot of people get deeply into debt, and there's no way out of the debt because the bills keep coming. Secondly, the present system is enriching the fossil fuel industry, which is making these huge profits while people go hungry. By the way, I say the fossil fuel industry, but the renewable energy industry doesn't actually solve this. Of course, it's much better for the climate and potentially much cheaper, but there can also be profiteering in that industry. And of course, also the prices of the infrastructure to make renewable energy are often based on exploitative mining in poor parts of the world. What can make a difference and bring bills down, massive scale, is retrofitting homes so that we don't need so much energy in the first place. That's crucial, but it doesn't help a lot of the people who are dying from cold now. On the government's quite optimistic projections, it will take a good 30 years. This year, they're planning to retrofit 1% of the homes that need it, and some of those aren't even the homes where there's fuel poverty. So in the meantime, while retrofitting's being done, if it's being done, we have to deal with prices. And there are basically two proposals on the table for that. One is the social tariff, where people on low incomes can pay for energy at a lower tariff than others. And a lot of charities are pressing for that. It's basically a type of means-tested benefit. Could be a benefit from the state, or it could be paid for by adding to the bills of people who don't qualify for the social tariff so that their bills go up while others' bills go down. The other proposal is energy for all, where everyone gets enough free energy to cover our basic needs, like the ones Kay spoke about: heating, lighting, washing, charging disability aids, as well as, the phones and computers and things that we need to keep in touch with the world. And energy for all will be paid for from two sources: profits from the fossil fuel industry and into subsidies, and higher tariffs for people who use a lot of energy. That is more than covering their needs. So we've been debating these two options with our friends and allies, but in the past few months, it's all been put into perspective by what happened with the winter fuel payment. And I think probably everybody on this call will know about that. It used to be £200 to £300 for all pensioners. But one of the first things this Labour government did when they got into power was to say that pensioners could only get the winter fuel payment if they're on pension credit. And pension credit is a means-tested benefit, so that amounts to means testing the winter fuel payment. And they said that scarce public money should not be going to people who might be quite well off. And of course, some pensioners are well off. Rachel Reeves actually thought she'd have the public behind her, but it didn't work out that way. Even the government had to admit that about 4,000 people were likely to die this winter as a result of the means test. There are some 800,000 people who are eligible for pension credit but don't get it. So now they don't get winter fuel payment either. And of course, a lot more people are just over the limit to qualify for pension credit, and they don't get it. So now they don't get winter fuel payment either. A lot of people were scandalized that Rachel Reeves was planning to fill her black hole with pensioners. And a lot of us didn't believe there was this black hole to begin with. We actually think there's plenty of money, and Energy for All is founded, and Fuel Poverty Action is founded on the principle that actually there is a lot of money in this system. A lot of it's in private hands, a lot of it's in energy companies. But there isn't a black hole except of their own making. And this time, I think she must have been surprised because the divide and rule didn't work. The divide and rule between young and old, the divide and rule between people who have just a little bit and people who have nothing. They were setting up each against the other, but in fact, it only served to set everyone up against the Labour Party. And it made people very wary of means testing in general. Of course, the alternative to means testing is something that whole generations fought for: universality, provision for everyone, like the NHS, and free school meals for primary school in Scotland and London. So Energy for All is in good company. Universality is a whole different way forward. This is not the political perspective of the current Labour Party. Their economics is very much based on means testing, just as it's based on the growth of private capital. And that is not a coincidence. But more and more people are coming to see that their economics don't work, or rather, they work very well for accumulating wealth at the top of society, but they don't keep the rest of us alive and healthy. Energy for All has been phenomenally popular. I'm sorry you can't hear a wider range of support tonight. Tonight was designed specifically to dig down into potential problems and things that need to be resolved about E4A, Energy for All. So we don't have our usual broad panorama. But in case you're in doubt, as Amal said, there was the 662,000 strong petition, 75% of people in a national poll, 250 organizations signed up to the manifesto, the basic principle accepted by the New Economics Foundation, the TUC, and quite a few MPs, some of them very enthusiastically. It's not a simple plan. It will require a lot of attention to what each household needs, including attention to our housing. But of course, our view is that that attention is required anyway. It will need to be worked in with renewable energy, taking advantage of the energy that's already free on a windy day, for example. It's not exactly simple, and no solution's perfect, but some of its strengths are: one, it's popular because it's fair. It's for everyone, but the really well-to-do will actually be paying more. They'll be paying a premium tariff for heating that private swimming pool. This is literally a revolution. It turns pricing right side up. As things stand, you pay less per unit if you're heating a mansion, and you pay more per unit if you're just heating a bedsit. That insanity is because of the standing charge. The standing charge is one of the key things that we're fighting on the way to winning the whole of Energy for All. But Energy for All would go further than just abolishing the standing charge. It would reverse the effect of it. The people who are using more than they actually need will pay more for it, and the people who just use what they need will get that all for free. Secondly, it's popular because it offers security. If you can at least count on your basic needs being met, that's a whole level of worry off your mind. At present, so many people are on starvation rations with energy. So many don't put their heat on at all during the winter. For them, a social tariff doesn't mean a lot because they still can't afford it. But if it's actually free, well, then you can afford to keep warm. You don't have to pass any test or jump through hoops to get it. And you don't lose it if your income increases. It's not a handout for the poor. It's something we all have in common. And 3, it's good for the climate because it encourages energy saving, unlike the social tariff, and because part of its funding comes from the fossil fuel industry. I think it's also popular because it attacks the fossil fuel profiteers. People have had it with them sucking up the money that's supposed to be feeding our children and spending it on their private flights, or worse, spending it on drilling for more oil. And finally, people choose E4A because we really, really don't trust the government, especially after the winter fuel payment. The government may say they'll be really kind with the social tariff and make sure everyone who needs the help will not fall off the cliff. But it's never worked that way. That's what they said about the winter fuel payment, and it's very far from the truth. And no one believes them. It's that bigger picture that gives us the courage to go on and look hard at the problems and questions about Energy for All itself and see how we can overcome them and make Energy for All come true. And of course, it gives us the courage to go on organizing, lobbying, warming up in public buildings together, spreading the message, doing all the things that we've talked about in these Fuel for Thought sessions about how we can actually bring this into being. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ruth. And again, Ruth is going to be there as well as part of the discussion to answer questions. But before we move on to that, we have last but not least of our speakers tonight, Jonathan Bean, who's Fuel Poverty Action's Policy and Parliament Lead. So our very own policy expert is going to be on hand to discuss specifics and answer your questions after talking a little bit more about Energy for All. Thank you, Jonathan. Take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, there have been lots of really powerful points made already, so I don't want to repeat them because we want to leave plenty of time for people to give us their thoughts, ideas, questions, etc., and have a really good discussion. So let me just go back to some of the basics, which are really important to remember. The first thing is that energy pricing is currently about 65% higher than it was in 2020, which is a pretty shocking statistic. What's even more worrying is that the projections are that it's going to stay at these high levels all the way to 2030 and beyond. So whilst there were promises running into the election that, you know, with more renewables coming through, prices are going to come down by maybe £300, that hope has kind of disappeared because the way the market is currently structured, which we can get into in more detail, but we cannot expect prices just to come down to more realistic levels. So that creates a massive problem for millions of people, and many of the groups we've heard about in terms of, you know, single mothers, pensioners, etc. But there are people in lots of different demographics all really suffering at these high levels, and these high levels are going to continue. And as Ruth said, you know, retrofitting efforts will take many years. So we have a real problem. And I think what we've seen is a lot of complacency from the current government about fuel poverty, in fact, about poverty in general. And that's really worrying. So it's really important that we don't let them fall into this complacency, and we really challenge for change on energy pricing, because unless it changes quickly, people are going to be suffering, every winter and during the year as well in many groups. And we're talking about, on a massive scale, the suffering that we've heard about a bit already. So it's a really worrying situation of people suffering and quite a lot of complacency. People need a lifeline. People's lives and their health is being really damaged. And an essential energy guarantee is essentially that lifeline, so that no one goes without the essential energy they need, whether it be for heating or the other basics that we need it for. Now, one of the challenges I quite often get is the idea of giving away some free energy being kind of, ridiculous and unaffordable. What's quite interesting is we're already doing it. Some people, when it's windy, get free energy. Typically, it's more affluent people who are on, a bit more tech savvy, a bit more aware of some of the unusual tariffs available, and they're able to get the free energy. Or with some energy suppliers, you might get half price energy if you sign up to the right kind of scheme. The reason for this is renewables are variable, and that means quite often when it's windy, there is excess energy. So there's energy we could be giving people right now that only a few people are getting. What we're doing, therefore, is actually we're paying wind farms to switch off. So they're getting hundreds of millions, and that's actually going to go up to billions as renewables increase. So we're wasting a lot of energy that we could be giving people for free. So the idea of free energy is not ridiculous. It's already happening, and we could be doing a lot more of it. Now, at the moment, the government's kind of saying, well, maybe another thing we can do is we can allow companies to build very large battery farms on, typically on farmland. A lot of people aren't very happy about this, lithium batteries, which is not great anyway, and allow companies to profit from basically taking this free energy and then selling it back to us at a big profit later. The alternative would be to give us more of this free energy. So it just shows that it's not just all the profits and all the costs of the energy system. It's also, there is actually free energy, increasing amounts of it available that we're not making good use of currently. So it's just another example of how the system is wasteful and how actually it's rigged so that certain firms can make a profit out of it rather than giving it to people to protect them and protect their lives and their health. So it's another example of the rigged system. Affluent people are typically getting a better deal, and people in big homes, as Ruth said, are paying less per unit. There's lots of other issues. The rigged wholesale market, where we pay the highest price for all the electricity, so we're not getting that cheap renewable benefit in many cases. We also pay billions extra on our bills for the energy retailers, who actually just provide a very rubbish service. And there's lots of subsidies and loopholes that oil and gas firms benefit from. So there's so much that needs to change in our energy system. And Ofgem, the energy firms, and some other organisations have said, well, maybe we can solve this with a social tariff, giving people on benefits cheaper prices. That would definitely help some people. But as we've seen with the winter fuel payment, there's a lot of people just above the cutoffs who don't tick the right boxes, who really suffer just by having something purely based on benefits. In the case of pensioners, it's about 2 million pensioners just above the cutoff who are really struggling this winter. So there are lots of problems with those kind of schemes. And even the government that's really keen on means testing has kind of now realised that actually the social tariff that was being proposed by energy firms, Ofgem, and some other organisations is quite flawed. Have asked them to go away and try and redo it to make it better. So there's a few months of work that they're going to be doing to try and come up with a better social tariff. And that obviously, in parallel, we're trying to persuade government that actually Energy for All is a better solution. But government is also looking at a third option, which essentially is just a tweak of the current system of the warm home discount, which some of you will be aware is £150 that's given to some people that are on benefits. If you're in a home that's too small, for example, you don't get it even if you are on benefits. So it's quite a limited plan, and it was changed a couple of years ago to take a lot of people on with disabilities, disabled people. A lot of people lost it in the way they changed it. So there's a lot of issues around, who gets it, how much it is. But there is a proposal from Citizens Advice that the government quite likes, where there will just be a higher tier available for people in bigger homes. And that's kind of an attractive option for government also, because it goes on straight on our bills. So Rachel Reeves is quite keen on this kind of idea that won't cost her any money. In her mind, at least, it will just increase our bills again. And this is a problem that obviously people who don't benefit, all these things keep going on bills and making them more and more expensive. So it doesn't really solve the problem. Obviously, there's another part of this, which Ruth mentioned also, which is standing charges. And that was supposed to be the first step to a fairer system. Huge numbers of the public demanded it, in line with our demand with Energy for All, to get rid of standing charges. And actually, both the main parties in the election promised it. Ofgem's now pretending that it's doing it by asking energy firms to offer that option. But it's a bit of a con, basically, because we know the energy firms will come up with kind of very shifty ways to tick the box that Ofgem has demanded, whilst actually hiding the standing charge in the first unit or two of energy. So we've exposed that this isn't really the solution. It's a bit of a con, and so that fight on standing charges also goes on. So maybe I think we've covered a lot of stuff now. Maybe this actually would be a good time to kind of open up the debate a bit and get people's thoughts. Very happy to take any questions of things that people feel are problematic about it. There's lots of issues with the standing with the social tariff, and obviously designing any scheme. There's always going to be issues with every scheme that's developed. Nothing's perfect. It's quite hard to get a really fair scheme. So very happy to take any questions from people about elements that they either don't understand or ideas they've got of improving it. Anything really, just to get people's input and get a bit of a discussion going. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Yeah, it's now time to hand over to everyone else that's here tonight. And yeah, ask us anything about Energy for All. But also I want to invite people who might have signed the petition or manifesto to contribute your perspective on why you think we need Energy for All. If you'd like to come in, please just raise your virtual hand. You can also type your questions. I'll be monitoring the chat and I can read out your words. To raise your hand, just click on the three dots at the bottom right of your Zoom window, scroll to reactions and click raise hand. Kevin, wonderful. Just give me 1 minute, Kevin, as I switch a few things just to allow everyone to be able to participate. Here we go. All right, I've got Kevin here first. Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you. Really good points, and thank you for all the speakers. Very useful information. Just one point I'll make, just to bear out what I think all the speakers have been saying. The reaction that we've got from Unite Community in Leeds, where we've had 5 street stalls, 2 of them outside Rachel Reeves' office. The reaction from the general public, not just people of a certain age who will maybe receiving the winter fuel allowance, but often young people saying that their elderly relatives are so upset, has been overwhelming. We did a campaign where we asked people to put their comments down on a post-it note, and we put them on a big cardboard sheet, and then we sent them off to Rachel Reeves' office. Very quickly, we had to say to people, please keep your comments clean, because they were putting down things that we couldn't send around on social media. The reaction was visceral in their anger, and And I think to sum them up, they say, we didn't vote for this. This isn't change. This is worse than before. So that's the reaction that we've had. So, and I think just supporting the speakers, the general public of all ages are absolutely furious at what has taken place. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Someone like to come in on that from our speakers?
No, not a lot to add.
Sure.
Holly might though.
Yes.
Great that you're
Obviously.
doing the stalls and picketing, her offices and everything in Leeds. Hooray!
Cheers. Yeah, Holly, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I'm disabled. I've never been able to work in my life, and I have to survive just on benefits. I don't get enough to survive, quite frankly. The things that I have to do on a daily basis, what I have to ration, what I have to sacrifice, it's mad how completely and utterly normal it has become to me now. 3 winters in a row, I have been sleeping in a woolly hat and lots of layers. Every day in winter, it's been so cold because I'm just at home, and I started last winter mostly staying in my bedroom because it was the warmest room in the house, and that way I could layer up and I could stay under my duvet, and I didn't really want to get out of my bed because it was just so cold otherwise. And my bedroom walls started going mouldy, and now I am not well enough to constantly try and clean this mould up, and it has taken over. My bathroom is taken over. I am cold all the time. The difference that Energy for All would make in my life would be so completely and utterly significant. Because despite the fact that I literally have the boiler switched off on the wall, and when I wash my hands in cold water because I'm so worried about spending just the amount of fuel that would heat up some water so I could wash my hands. Like, I've had to ration the amount of water that I drink, the amount of water that I use to try and wash with. And to go from like being able to have a shower, a long shower, like every day, to then having to break it down to a couple of showers a week, it's horrible, particularly like in summer when you're getting hot and sweaty and feeling yucky all the time. And to feel like permanently yucky. Because this is a problem that, yeah, in winter I'm freezing cold, and in the summer I'm red hot, and then also feeling sticky and gross. It's so undignified, and having to live in this manner in what is an incredibly rich country is disgraceful. Just the amount on standing charges, the majority of my bill is a standing charge. The difference it could make in my life not having a standing charge. Imagine if I could spend that money actually on my bill and have fans on to cool me in the summer, to be able to wash as much as I need, to be able to drink as much as I need, and to be able to heat my home as much as I need. This is why Energy for All is just so completely and utterly essential, because I know I'm not alone in this. I know that I am one of many, many people who are disabled and who are barely scraping along. And the general consensus of feeling is that this government, it just wants to kill us. And that's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. It's like I say, the Energy for All, it would be an astounding positive difference in the lives of disabled people. Like me being able to charge my electric wheelchair to get out and about whenever I wanted, rather than thinking I need to stay inside because I can't afford to charge that battery up. Because it has to be on charge all day. So it's like, I can't afford to charge that all day. I'm going to have to stay inside. It just, the social connection, the living in dignity, being able to actually have my needs met. And this should not be a beautiful dream. And with all of our hard work put together, we can make it a reality. It's just about getting there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming in, Holly. Yeah, very, yeah. We had a hand from Pamela. Would you like to come in at the National Bargee Association?
Hi, thanks, Amal. Yes, I'm Pamela Smith from the National Bargee Travellers Association. I just wanted to say a little bit about the experience of boat dwellers, and that we've had some previous contact with yourselves, Fuel Poverty Action, and it means that you have included boat dwellers in the manifesto and so on, which is great. Most people who live on boats are almost entirely off grid, so any kind of energy for all policy needs to include people who don't have a relationship with the main energy suppliers. Most boaters use bottled LPG gas for cooking and sometimes for heating water. Most of us generate our own electricity through either the diesel engine of the boat or solar panels, or usually a combination of both. Some have wind generators, but not many. If you're on a marina mooring, you may well have an electric hookup, but you don't have a direct relationship with the electricity company because that is supplied by the landlord of the mooring. In other words, you pay over the odds to the marina operator for your electricity pillar on your mooring. Most boaters have heating, which is a solid fuel stove. Some have a diesel stove to heat water. There are various other ways of heating and generating electricity, but this is represent the majority of boat dwellers. I'd say at least half of boat dwellers couldn't access the EBSS Energy Bill Support Scheme grant that some of us managed to obtain 2 years ago now. There are still a large number of boat dwellers who never managed to benefit from that funding. And one of the other things that's happening at the moment is that the Environment Act 2021 enabled local authorities to extend smoke control orders to moored boats. In other words, if you're in a smoke control zone now, and the local authority has extended it to moored boats as well as buildings, you will be unable to do what a large number of boat dwellers do. You will be unable to burn wood that you either forage or you're given or you find. A lot of boaters spend their time cutting wood, chopping it up, getting it dry, and then using it to heat their boats. If you're not in a smoke control area, you can do that, but if you are in a smoke control area, you can no longer do that, and that means that some boat dwellers, bearing in mind that there's quite a high level of extreme poverty amongst boat dwellers. I mean, we're a diverse community, but there are a lot of us who live on very little, partly because it's difficult accessing benefits when you're nomadic, and in some cases when you've got a permanent mooring, even because you don't necessarily have an address. but it means that if you're in a smoke control area, you either have to pay a lot more money for smokeless fuel, bearing in mind that most coal that you can buy now is supposed to be smokeless. You're not able to buy the traditional house coal now. So some of us are in a position where we have to choose between breaking the law and burning foraged wood, or paying over the odds for smokeless fuel, or being cold. And a lot of boats aren't as well insulated as houses. So if you don't have a stove, if you can't run your stove, then you will literally freeze. Okay, that's all I've got to say at the moment. But please, if anyone has any questions, please do ask them. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks very much, Amal. And
Thanks
everyone.
so much, Pamela. Thank you for being here. Yeah, Jonathan, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks for explaining that all. So how much do you think could be potentially electrified? Because obviously we're paying for people's homes, regular homes, to be changed to electrically heated, insulating people's homes, etc. How much could we potentially support people to, giving people free solar panels, free insulation, electric cooking, free electric hookups that are currently expensive, those kind of things? How far do you think we could take electrification?
I would say free solar panels would be the best option. Electrifying the towpath, because bearing in mind a large proportion of boat dwellers are nomadic and they don't have a mooring at all. A lot of boat dwellers who do have a mooring don't have an electricity supply to the mooring. It's only the most expensive moorings that have an electricity supply, and you have to pay over the odds. Some local authorities have worked with navigation authorities, especially Canal and River Trust, to install a few electric hookup posts, mostly in urban areas like Oxford and London, along the towpath and on certain types of short stay visitor moorings. So if you're on a short stay visitor mooring, you may, like maybe, I don't know, 0.1% of the short stay visitor moorings probably have electric hookup of some kind, but it's really expensive, and most boats are not equipped to have a shore, what we call shore power, electric hookup. We don't have necessarily a 240 volt circuit. A lot of boats only have a 12 volt circuit. Electric cooking is absolutely out of the question for most boaters, unless you do have an electric hookup on the mooring, or unless you have a fully electric boat, which again, maybe 0.1% of boaters do have a fully electric boat where the power is generated by solar panels, batteries, and a big diesel generator to fill in the gaps. So I recently met a boater whose boat is all electric, and they have an electric cooker, which is an induction hob. They have a solid fuel stove where they burn wood and coal, but everything else is electric, from the solar panels, the batteries, and or a big generator. That includes the engine, because don't forget, most of us are obliged to move every 14 days if we're not on a permanent mooring. So most boat engines are diesel, and the price of all of these has gone up. And every form of fuel that you use in a boat, unless it's renewable, they have gone up massively in price. Gas bottles maybe double what they used to be. Coal, wood, if you buy wood, it's become more expensive. Heat logs, the heating fuel that you get in supermarkets, that's all gone up in price. And diesel, the red diesel that we're able to use because of the HMRC derogation, that has gone up in price quite a lot. It hasn't doubled in price like gas, but it's gone up a lot. Yeah, so renewable energy, yes, solar panels, free solar panels would really help. Some kind of arrangement, some kind of voucher scheme would be great, where boaters could exchange vouchers for coal or bottled gas or diesel because you don't, generally speaking, you don't go out to a garage with a can and buy the diesel for your boat, although some people do. You go to a boatyard and buy diesel from the boatyard because that's on the water, or you buy diesel from a fuel boat and they sell diesel, coal, and gas and logs and stuff. Does that answer people's questions?
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'd say that the same sort of thing applies to people who live in caravans, mobile homes. A lot of people live in vehicles in certain places, especially Bristol. I think there are more van dwellers in Bristol than any other place in the UK at the moment. People who live off grid on their own land, maybe in benders and things like that. A lot of people who live off grid in other than on boats also face these particular sorts of issues.
And free insulation, how helpful would that be?
Most boats to insulate a boat that's not insulated, that would make a difference to the person living in it, but it's quite disruptive because you would have to remove all the paneling, put up spray foam insulation, and then put the paneling back. So it's very, very disruptive, probably more disruptive than insulating a house.
Thank you.
But most boats do come with insulation, which is usually spray foam. With older boats, it might be polystyrene and maybe not very good.
Thank you, Pamela. Really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Akua, would you like to come in?
It's actually Vicky who's going to ask a question.
Hi, I'm Vicky. We're in Manchester listening to everything. And I think our question when we first heard about the campaign was, how do you work out a baseline for fuel, the baseline of the fuel, trying to think what the word is.
The free or cheap fuel that everyone gets.
But yeah, the kind of universal fuel costs. When I don't see how, because it's all with individuals and their circumstances. So how would that ever work in practice? That's what we're trying to get our head around. The actual mechanics of it, really. I don't want to be too negative, but we're just thinking how that's been thought through.
We have a second question, but it'd be good to get that one first, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. That's a question we get quite often. I think Jonathan would be happy to answer it, and Ruth perhaps. Yeah.
Shall I do this one, Jonathan? It means actually looking closely at what people's circumstances are, and particularly on at their housing. And that's already being done for EPC, for instance. Anytime a house is bought or sold, and for landlord lettings and so on, there has to be some EPC. The EPC, Energy Performance Certificate, they're notorious. They're really, really bad system, and a lot of people are getting screwed because they're told that they've got good insulation and so on, when in fact it's terrible, or even the other way around. So that has to be done better anyway. regardless of energy for all, the houses need to be looked at to see what state they're in and what actually is needed. And anybody who is serious about making sure that people get what they need to survive and be healthy has to admit that the first thing you have to do is find out what the situation is and what needs to happen to the homes. There are also other factors.
How would you get that basic calculation though, when everybody's? I mean, I understand you can look at the house, but it depends how many people in the house, how big the house is. There's so many variables. How could you actually have a baseline?
Well, a lot of that's being done already, and Jonathan can give you more details on that than I can. But basically, there's an awful lot of information that the state has about, how many people are living in a home, what their age is, what their disabilities are. That is all being gathered and being put on big computers as we speak. And, a lot of that's been going on for years now, if not decades. It's actually a matter of using it to make sure that people get what they actually need.
Should I just jump in on a couple of the details? So,
can I just ask, does Ruth mean the census or something? I'm sorry, I haven't quite understood when you say people are gathering this info.
No, I mean, a lot of that is stuff that, like, you have to fill in if you apply for any benefit, you have to fill in and say what your disability is. If you apply for a council tax rebate, you have to say how many people are living in your home. There's the census. I mean, it's just like our information is being gathered by the NHS, by the DWP, house insurance, again and again. But Jonathan, you have more details, right?
Yeah, just talk about a few things. So firstly, for most of the properties, we already have calculated how many kilowatt hours per year are needed for heating and how many are needed for hot water. As Ruth said, we are in the process of improving that system from the EPC system using a new technique called the home energy model. So we're already going to be updating all that information and basically to access things like retrofit, etc., as well as the rental and house sale, etc. You have to have an EPC or the new improved version that is going to be rolled out very soon. So we're gathering all that information. We're not using that currently in order to provide, the basic heating or the basic hot water. So we know already, we have databases to show that a huge number of people are massively underheating their homes. Because if you compare what we've already calculated is necessary to heat a home to a safe temperature and to get the safe amount of hot water, compared to what people are doing, we know there's a massive gap. So a lot of people are massively underheating their homes. So we know there's a big problem. We have the data already. We're just not using that data. This is part of the problem. And we're also, as Ruth said, we're capturing a lot of data that's currently sitting on different databases and not being used in the right way. So, the DWP versus Inland Revenue versus the local council, it's all a bit of a mess. People with disabilities, in some cases, they're getting energy paid for the equipment they need, but it depends what area you're in. So there's no universality. If you're in one area with one NHS trust, you get that electricity paid for. In others, you get zero. So this is the problem, that there's no universal fair system. We're not using the data, and it's a bit of a lottery whether you get the support you need depending on where you live and whether you happen to tick the right boxes. And that's the kind of inequality and unfairness we want to get rid of. So it's making better use of the data we have already, as well as the improvements I've talked about. So we're already doing a lot of this. We're just not using it effectively.
So if somebody in their own private home who it has a lot of money and a big house and are underheating the house because it's so big, how would that work? Because you would be subsidizing them.
Well, at the moment, what we find is that people in large houses tend to fall into two groups typically. There are people that just use loads and loads of energy. They don't really care. And you can see that in the data. There's lots of big houses using enormous amounts of energy. And then there are some that have invested in solar panels, batteries, etc. And they're actually getting pretty cheap energy. And what they're doing is they're actually getting subsidized by us. So going on our bills is, for example, the feed-in tariff, which was a very generous scheme that a lot of wealthier people got lots of solar panels and they're getting free energy. So the system already as it stands massively benefits people in larger houses. In fact, a lot of the schemes kind of are benefiting that group. So anything we do to make it fairer for people that aren't getting that free energy, haven't got solar panels, aren't getting those kind of benefits, will help even things out. So we believe that by giving people an essential energy, we'll make sure that it evens the playing field. It will never be a perfect system. There is no perfect system, but it will be fairer than what we have today, and it will be safer because we know at least that we won't have this current situation where there's a lot of people actually in pretty small houses that are not even turning the heating on at all. Even people in, a lot of people in flats, for example, just don't turn the heating on. They don't get the warm home discount, for example, because the government says that their homes are too small to need the warm home discount. Many of them have electric heating, which actually costs 4 times more than gas. So there are so many things with the current system that are so unfair that these changes will make things fairer. No system is perfect, but it will be fairer than what we have today.
Can I ask the second question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So we're trying to build a hub in Manchester. And we're particularly trying to reach out to global majority communities. And one of the things that we've found at the moment that's quite difficult, and it'd be really good to hear how that's being addressed by other people, is the people who are most committed to looking at fuel poverty and within their communities are looking for solutions now. And how do you move them from things that they're trying to, because people are in dire circumstances now, they're the people working with the people dying. How do you move them from that sort of frontline, let's try and solve the problem, not because they don't want to be involved, but how do they into looking at and getting behind something which is around a policy change or, like something that's for the future. And they might, we haven't actually even managed to get them to engage to say it makes sense, but we might, I'm sure we will. But I just wondered what other people have done in terms of getting people to commit to something like energy for all, because it doesn't offer any immediate solution to people in their homes now.
Maybe I could help with that.
Yeah, please go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, because that was a question from the beginning of Fuel Poverty Action. And there's always a pressure to really work hard to try to help anybody who comes to you in desperate straits. There's unfortunately a real limit to what you can do. And there are groups who are doing what they call casework, with quite a lot of expertise, who are good at finding out if there's any other benefit that somebody might be entitled to, if they might be able to get some kind of a grant to upgrade their home. If there are sort of short fixes, like there are ways to deal with mold or deal at least with condensation that are not, they don't need sort of big expensive fixes. They can be quite small, cheap fixes, and they can make a big difference. A lot of people put the equivalent of cling film over their windows to just insulate it. There's a member of FPA who always talks about having to do that every winter, and she's in her 80s and has to climb up and put the bleeding cling film on. Private rented home. She's not here tonight. But there are things that people can do, and if people actually join the group and want to get involved, then it is possible for to help each other do that kind of thing. But there is a trap in that if you do really get involved in helping a lot of people that way, which I know you always want to do, if you do that, then you don't do anything else. And there are quite a lot of organizations that do
Sorry,
specialize in that.
I think the question is slightly missing the question. The question isn't why aren't we doing that? We know the people are doing it. My question is, how do you get people who are committed to those actions interested and behind something like Energy for All? So it's that transition. So the question wasn't, oh, this isn't important to do, we want to do frontline. That wasn't what I was asking at all. I was trying to ask, how do you actually work with people who are doing that already? And they're often the very passionate people who are grassroots leaders in those communities. How do you turn them on to something like Energy for All? That I just wanted that feedback. What has happened that you can tell me where you said, well, we were working with those people, and actually this is what converted them.
Yes. Okay. Well, one thing is warm-ups, which I know you know about, but quite a lot of people who are in fuel poverty have actually been really wanting to take part in these sort of occupations of public spaces. People are very angry and want a way to express their anger in a way that they feel is going to lead to something, even if it's not immediate. And I think we underestimate people if we think that people who need something immediately can't see that sometimes it's going to take time, and you can only get to it, via campaigning. Whether it's a action towards an MP, the idea of what Unite was doing outside Rachel Reeves' office. They're really lucky to have Rachel Reeves there. It's fantastic that there's a group that is in that position. But there are scandalous things going on with local authorities. I'm working with people in Lambeth who are being screwed over by Lambeth Council on their communal heating systems, and they really want to move on that. And that, even although it's a bit smaller than Energy for All, it still takes time. It's not an immediate thing, but there are things that really spur people on, like the fact that some people could get evicted because they can't pay their heating bills. I don't know a better answer to that, Ekua. I know that people in Unite have mobilized on quite a large scale, and people hearing from other people in similar situations, like we've got Fuel Poverty Voices setting up, where people will be able to speak about their own situation and use their own situation to be able to help make change. And that's something that a lot of people want to take part in. Now, of course, there are people who don't, but there are people who do. And you kind of have to start with those ones. Somebody else might have a better answer.
Thank you.
Amal, I think there's somebody in the waiting room.
Oh, yeah. Or Akira, did you have did you want to come back on that?
I guess I feel like it was that my question's been responded to very defensively. I was asking for very practical examples of that transitional, behavioral transition. And I don't feel like, but instead I feel like I got like a sort of like I'm challenging that what you're doing is legitimate. Absolutely not. It's the opposite, in fact. We're looking for help in terms of the work we're doing. And some practical, well, yeah, this happened here and that, yeah, yeah. So I think we will have to go away and just continue to answer these questions for ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Kua. I'm going to bring in Tim Root, who's been waiting for a while now.
Thank you. I was very pleased to see that you took the very impressive petition to Downing Street in October, and I'd be grateful to hear what reaction there's been, both from the Prime Minister's office or from the media or from other bits of the government.
Would someone like to come in on that from Tim? Jonathan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think there is still a worrying level of complacency with the government about doing something significant on fuel poverty. They still want to kind of repeat the lines of, the combination of renewables and some retrofitting will deal with fuel poverty, but we're open to ideas. And they say they are still very much considering the options. As I said, the people pushing the social tariff idea have been told to go away and spend a few months improving it. So I think the time scale of when anything may happen is a few months away. So it's very much for us to continue to keep the pressure on about this being a strong option to deal with this fuel poverty crisis. Make sure that that attention doesn't go away when the weather warms up, because obviously it's very much a focus right now. So to keep the pressure on government is really, really important. And as I said, they're kind of thinking about a bit of a tweak rather than something more radical. And I think we need to make sure that they don't get away with just doing something small along the lines of just a bit of a tweak to the warm home discount, which is probably the lead idea in their mind right now, is a bit of a tweak that's not going to cost them money and isn't going to be too radical and isn't going to get in the headlines and looks like they're doing something without doing very much. So that's the danger. They're going to do something a bit more cosmetic and rather than fundamental. But it's still very much to play for. And I think, this year, probably something will happen, hopefully something significant rather than just a small tweak.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Tim, do you feel like that's you got an answer to your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. And Ellen, I'm going to bring you in. Thank you for waiting.
Sorry, I've been coming in and out because I wasn't sure whether we don't have that much time left. But actually, just what Ekua, is that if I pronounced that correctly, was just saying, it just reminds me a lot of when I was very involved in campaigning against the bedroom tax, and it is I think it's just a fact that for every 100 people that you actually help with their benefit claims, you might get one that is actually that can actually become interested in campaigning and actually joining a campaign group and doing that political work, which is, I think, if I understood correctly, that was the gist of the question. And thinking about it now, I know I look back on that and think we actually weren't very good at that. We weren't actually very strategic. That maybe we could have done more things like having socials or something like that, where people could actually get to know each other and then might have felt more inclined to get involved with the campaigning side of things, rather than just, okay, you've got my benefits sorted out, bye bye. And I think that warm spaces can do some of that work, I guess. So I don't know whether that helps, but it's just a thought. I think the reason I put my hand down earlier was because I thought what I was going to say was really rather self-evident, but it was really, what Holly was saying. It's so clear. Cold homes are known to cause mental health problems. That's a huge factor in the prevalence of depression. But I think the really distressing thing is it's depression in children as well, and affecting their learning ability, and that that really has long-term consequences, which also, I'm going to make a slight diversion here and say thank you to Kay for emphasizing that child rearing is work and it should be paid for, and in the benefit system, it's deemed to be a barrier to doing work that you can be paid for. So, we've got all these multiple problems that really land predominantly on single parents, of being blamed for children not being school ready and all these, as well as all the practical difficulties. I think the more, if you like, the political point that I was going to make is that, yes, I very much take the point that retrofitting and insulating homes and getting low energy heating systems installed is long term. It's long term because the workforce is yet to be trained. As we've got a fraction of the workforce that's needed, but it is actually vitally important that we get on with that. And I think it's important to make the political point that what the government's doing in terms of the energy system is investing our public money in big projects that benefit the corporate, the energy giants, and not into the amount of money they're actually investing in mass retrofit programs is only a fraction of what they were promising this time last year, for example. And it's pitiful in comparison to what's needed. And I think my view and the view of my organisation, which is the Campaign Against Climate Change, is that actually this needs to be done as public works. So I think it's the same argument really as the free allowance of energy, that it should come from progressive taxation. It should be public works. No, there should be solar panels on all the roofs, and they could be owned by a national, a national publicly owned energy system. So that might sound impossibly sort of radical and unrealistic, but I think that's the direction we want to be pointing in.
Thank you for that, Ellen. Yeah, I feel like this is also a question that someone mentioned in the chat earlier. Saying, we had Glenn saying, I don't think anyone mentioned public ownership of energy. This is surely crucial. I don't know if maybe Jonathan, you have something to say about, whether you see public ownership of energy as like an important thing to talk about in the context of energy for all.
Yeah, I can pick that up, and there are a couple of other things I wanted to comment on as well. So that people have been talking about, just on the public ownership point, there's definitely an issue. I mean, as everyone will, is well aware, GB Energy was kind of the policy the new government has pushed forward as a step towards a bit of public ownership. But we're quite worried about how that money is being spent and whether it's really going to benefit, the public, or whether it's going to end up just being another chunk of money going to private firms. So yeah, if you look at all the money that's being spent, as Ellen was just saying, a huge amount is ending up going to private companies, who essentially they have to pay, they're borrowing money at higher rates than governments would do. So it's actually more expensive even before you get to thinking about the profits that are being taken out of the system as well. So it's definitely very problematic. And, GB Energy is really not delivering the promise that it had. So yeah, I agree with that point. Just on a couple of things that Ellen was saying, totally agree on the workforce point. The retrofit does need to get done. It will take a long time, but until we have enough well-trained people working in an ethical way, we're never going to get anywhere. I mean, there was an announcement last week, at the end of last week, in the Commons from Miata, the energy minister, saying, that a lot of cowboy companies have been taken off government schemes. So at the moment, we have a lot of cowboy operators doing retrofit because there's a shortage of well-skilled people, and the way it's organised is very chaotic. So that needs to change, and we're pulling together a proposal to do that. So that is very important. On going back to the question about how do you persuade people that are working on the front line to get involved in other areas. I think Fuel Poverty Voices is potentially an example. The power of someone who's working on the front line, speaking out in media, speaking to policymakers is incredibly powerful. I mean, we can write lots of proposals to government ministers and to MPs, but when they hear someone who's working on the front line talking about the issues, it's way more powerful. So I think, we should talk to people about the power of speaking out in those ways, whether they are themselves suffering from fuel poverty or whether they're helping people on the front line who are suffering from fuel poverty. Those people speaking out, Fuel Poverty Voices offers one way of doing that. Obviously, there are others as well, and obviously Imogen in our team is setting that up if people are interested in talking to her about that a bit more.
Thank you, Jonathan. Are there any final questions for any of our speakers this evening, or anyone who hasn't spoken who wants to come in and talk about their situation, why Energy for All would help, or have other questions about Energy for All and the plan for free universal energy? Steve, yes.
Evening, everybody. I'll try to keep it brief and keep it very general. I think that in terms of trying to deal with these issues, if we look at France, for example, France has got more people in fuel poverty per head of population than we have. But yet, on the other hand, France has got a state pension, which is 3 times the state pension. Their state pension is something like £30,000. There are variations on that, but it's something of that order, over and above, many times more than our £10,000. But I suppose that to some extent they would make that up in the sense that they don't have quite the money coming in from the opposite side for retired people and so on in terms of general benefits and a welfare benefit system that we have. I'm guessing on that, but I think it does have a key underlying theme that for me, which is that quite simply what we're doing is we're not paying for what the basic needs of people are, paying to protect the population of this country. The priority seems to be to spend money elsewhere in vanity projects like HS2 instead of actually making sure that people's basic needs are met. And I think all of this falls into that category. And, in some ways to do what we're doing with Energy for All, it can be like a little wedge that we're putting in there. And I think something like using the universal basic income principle, but starting to apply it as a little wedge into things in terms of energy policy and the way energy is provided, it probably is going to be better. It might be easier to do that than do some other measures. If you're going to tackle energy the way that we're describing and do Energy for All, it might be easier just to deal with that and say that up to a certain number of kilowatt hours of any sort of energy use per annum, that is for everybody in the country, that is free. And then over and above that, you pay a higher rate per kilowatt hour for the excess energy over that base. And that baseline, as an engineer talking, I can say that it's not actually very difficult to calculate what a property will use in terms of energy. And then you would consider what's the bare minimum, but then you would find that level, to my mind, you would find that level of what could be regarded as like for lack of a better word, a subsistence level of the amount of energy that's reasonable. You'd find that, then bump it up another 10% or so. And then if people have got benefits and so on coming in other directions, they can then spend some of that money as they see fit on providing a little extra bit. And of course, as we mentioned in the chat here, is it was Ellen. Ellen had mentioned in the chat was that we basically need to make special cases then for people who have different disabilities and different problems, or carers for their children, whatever it happens to be. There are unique situations that make it even more difficult for them to deal with the energy prices and the problem on that. So I think that sort of direction of thinking about it and why it's happening in the first place, because the money in the country is just being spent in the wrong place. It's just, I think in France too, they do tend to do it that way around. You give people money, and then they've got a basic ability to deal with the things they need to deal with, rather than just starting to nitpick about who gets what, and starting to look at people's bank accounts about what kind of money they're spending, what things they're spending their money on. That's just anathema to me. This is just, controlling people's basic right to life and to choices and make and have their own free choice in life. And I just totally disagree with that principle. But there we go. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. I'm going to bring in a last comment from yes, Zoom user. I can't see your name, I'm afraid, but you've got your hand up. Hiya. Would you like to unmute yourself, please?
Okay.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Leda, and I'm from Unite Community Leeds, Wakefield, New York. I'm living this. I'm in the front line. I'm sitting in my room currently at 16 degrees C. And as you can see, I am well wrapped up, and I also have a heated blanket over me as well. I'm told by my energy company, Octopus, that I'm not truly struggling. Those are the words that they use to me. I undertake welfare entitlement work for my branch of Unite Community, so my income is maximised. I've got everything coming in that I should have coming in. I do get winter fuel payment. I do get warm home discount. I have a disability. I'm unable to regulate my body heat, so I need to keep as warm as I possibly can. And already I am in quite a lot of debt to Octopus, who are really not helping at all. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. My children bail me out, but should they be doing that? I don't think they should. I think that I should be able to live at a level where I can actually pay for my energy bills. And for example, my last month's energy bill, and I don't use an oven, was £150. You know, that is all my warm home discount gone in one go. I pay a direct debit of £90 a month, but I'm still in arrears. So yeah, it's difficult. I don't have to make the choice of eating or heating because my kids will feed me, but it's not a position that I want to be in. You know, I don't want to be here. And yes, it does affect your physical health, and yes, it does affect your mental health. Thanks.
Coming in, Nina. Got a hand from Ruth and a hand from Jonathan as well. Do you want to give us some closing comments?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Leader. I wonder sometimes Octopus has a reputation to maintain. They're supposed to be the best.
Yeah.
And occasionally a company like that can be publicly embarrassed, which, you know, might be worth a tack, you know, something worth trying in this case, especially if you've got people around you locally. I wanted to apologize because I lost my connection to the meeting, and I was just in the middle of trying to explain something, and particularly Akua and others in Manchester. You know, I'd be glad to sort of chat another time if I didn't get to provide what you were looking for in the way of examples and so on. I'm really sorry to have missed, you know, what you had to say about it, and what other people contributed on that. That's a problem with my Zoom. It doesn't usually happen in the middle of an important meeting, but it did this time. So sorry about that, and I hope we can make it up otherwise than that. On the public ownership question, it's very much part of the solution and very much part of what we're pressing for. It's not immediately a part of Energy for All. We wanted to separate the two, although in some ways they can't be separated out. But the fact is that people don't necessarily have confidence that something that is publicly run is going to be run well. And I know, you know, local authorities are seen as a solution to a lot of things, and sometimes they are. But the people in Lambeth are being literally threatened with eviction by their council because they can't pay their heating bills. And people don't have confidence that a public company is necessarily going to be run for their benefit. It may well be, it's got a better chance, but we wanted to make a demand that was specific to make sure that people get what we need to survive. And then that demand can be there, whoever it is that is actually running the show. So it's not an either or. They do go together, but they're not exactly the same thing. And probably it would have been a good idea for us to mention that in the first place. So I hope we can bear that in mind among the other valuable things that people have raised to mention next time.
Thank you, Ruth. Jonathan, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, just on that last point, there's obviously also a lot of effort going on to develop, community energy, community-owned energy, local power plan as part of the work that's going to be done this year, and other groups are doing a lot of good work on that. So hopefully that enables more proper local ownership of energy resources that can actually power homes, which in the past has only been able to power things like schools, etc. So that's going on in parallel as well. I was just going to say on LEADER, I was just saying, maybe, I don't know if you're potentially willing to engage with Fuel Poverty Voices. It would be great to have another voice, and that's Imogen in our team. I don't know if Amal can maybe just pop her email for anyone that's interested in Fuel Poverty Voices, and maybe just explain at the end that we're in the process of setting that up. What was the other point? That's probably it, actually. On Octopus. It's a great example of the problem, another problem with the system, which is depending on who your energy firm is, some people are going to their energy firm, and because their particular scheme, you tick their boxes, they write off your debt, or they give you cheaper energy or something like that. Obviously, in this case, Octopus have failed for you, and that shows like how unfair the system is. We need a system that gives everyone the same kind of support. Shouldn't matter who you're with. I mean, Octopus do some good things with customer service, but also I was a bit shocked when Greg, the chief exec, was media saying actually the solution is actually electric blankets, and that could save people a lot of money. That was quite a shocking. He obviously hadn't thought it through properly. Someone had given him this number that if you turn off your heating and use an electric blanket, you can save X £100. And he obviously hadn't thought through, what that actually, how people would respond to that, and what he's really saying. I mean, I was quite shocked he said that, because he has actually done some good stuff as well. So it just shows how much of a mess our whole system is. And, obviously, turning off your heating and having electric blankets is not the way to live. That's just how people are forced to survive.
Verena, do you want to come in very quickly? You're muted.
Yes, it was about Octopus. I don't know if any people here are members of a trade union, but certainly if they're a member of Unison, there may be some leverage on Octopus because it's their preferred supplier, because we have a lot of low salaried members, and they advocate the use of. So if you complain to Unison and say, why is this your preferred provider, there may be some leverage in that. And also, if you're a trade unionist, you can probably get help from their welfare departments. Not promising anything, because I know the pots are getting smaller over the years as more people are going for help from their unions, but it's just another avenue for maybe some extra support.
Thank you very much for that, Verena. And with that, I'm going to close the session. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, and a special thank you to our speakers and Kay for joining us and sticking through the session with us. I put a few links in the chat there. The first one is to sign the Energy for All petition and join the 660,000 other people who have done so, if you haven't already. If you are involved in an organization in any way, you can try and get them to sign the Energy for All manifesto. And the third link is a little feedback form, very short, to let us know how you found this session. Look out for the announcement of the next Fuel for Thought, which will be on the 3rd Thursday of February. That's the 20th at the same time in the same place. And I invite everyone to turn their cameras on, turn your mics on, give us a little wave and say good evening, just to say goodbye. Hope to see you again.
Thanks, Joel.
soon.
Cheers.
Good evening. Thank you.
Have a good dinner.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Good.
you.